The lab exercise we're going to work on is going to focus on what are known as electrolytic, which would be non-spontaneous electrochemical cells. An electrolytic cell is something when we calculate the E cell, we would have a negative value indicating that the cell does not produce voltage and does not occur on its own. But rather, if we input electrical energy, we can force the reaction to occur. This would be an example of what we would identify as being an electrolytic cell. In taking a close look at this, the silver solid in this reaction is being oxidized, and that the silver solid is turning from solid to positive ions. It would have to be losing electrons. The zinc ions are being reduced, and that the zinc ions are having to gain electrons and turn into elemental zinc solid. The two half reactions we have are oxidation again, would be the elemental silver losing electrons to turn into ionic silver. In this case, because we've taken the reduction half reaction and flipped it to be an oxidation, the sign of the reduction potential would flip. This now has a value of negative 0.80 volts for the oxidation half reaction. The zinc half reaction, which remains as a reduction, keeps the value as displayed on the reduction half reaction chart, and it's negative 0.76 volts for the zinc half reaction. Adding the two half reactions together gives us a negative 1.56 volts. So for our reaction, the E cell comes out to be a negative 1.56 volts, which identifies this particular reaction as written as being an electrolytic and non-spontaneous electrochemical cell. Rewriting our electrochemical cell reaction to include the voltage would now be placed on the reactant side, which indicates that if we add this much voltage to the reactants, we can actually, through electrical energy, force the reaction to proceed in the forward direction. If we now diagram this electrochemical cell, we have one cell each, one beaker each, one that has our oxidation half reaction, the other one has the reduction half reaction. Now in this case the silver is going to be oxidized, the zinc is getting reduced. We still need to have our salt bridge to complete the electrical circuit. Now one thing that will be different for our non-spontaneous electrochemical cell is that we're going to have to hook the electrodes of our chemical reaction to a battery, which provides a power source to force the reaction to proceed in the direction in which it's non-spontaneous. By adding electrical energy, we can push the reaction to occur in this direction. Now our battery is actually a spontaneous electrochemical cell that's producing electrical energy. The battery will determine the direction of the electron flow in our setup. Now as we recall, for a spontaneous electrochemical cell, our electrons leave from the negative terminal, so this will tell us that the electrons are going out from the negative terminal, and electrons flow back into the positive terminal on our battery. Going back to our reaction that we have, we've identified that the zinc is where electrons have to flow in, and our silver is where electrons are going to be flowing out, given that the zinc is the location of our reduction, and the oxidation and the silver is the location of our oxidation. This tells us which terminal on the battery each of these electrodes, the zinc and the silver, need to be connected to. The silver, because the electrons are leaving, would be connected to the terminal where electrons are flowing back in to our battery. So the silver would get connected to the positive terminal on the battery, whereas the battery is pushing electrons out from the negative terminal. So the negative terminal would be connected to our zinc, in which the reduction half reaction is taking place. Now, as with a spontaneous electrochemical cell, reduction is still the location of what we would label as being our cathode, and the oxidation is still the location of our anode in our non-spontaneous electrochemical cell. One thing that becomes different is the labeling of our positive and negative electrodes for the non-spontaneous cell. The wire that we have connected to our battery, which runs over and connects to the zinc, is essentially an extension of the negative terminal on the battery. So the zinc is effectively just connected to the negative terminal on the battery, which makes the zinc negative by virtue of being connected to and touching the negative of the battery. Likewise, the silver, because the silver is connected to the positive on the battery, the silver is essentially an extension of that positive terminal, and the silver would be labeled as being the positive in our electrolytic non-spontaneous cell. The reaction we're now going to run in our lab exercise is we're going to take the non-spontaneous reaction of water separating into its respective elements of hydrogen and oxygen, and we're going to add in some voltage to push this reaction or force it to happen. The setup for the lab will be we'll take some electrodes made of graphite, dip them into some tap water, connect the electrodes to the positive and negative terminals of an outside power source, and this will force the reaction to occur. The battery, again, determines the direction of electron flow. Our battery is a spontaneous cell, so electrons will leave from the negative and flow back into the positive. This then also determines what's happening at each of our terminals in the electrolytic cell that we have.